Hello. Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to this Climate Ambition Across the Globe event, hosted by our friends at UN Global Compact. Thank you all for coming. Thank you for our distinguished panel, and thank you for everyone watching online this event directly from Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt. It's an honor to be here. My name is Luis Amaral, and I'll be the moderator for today's panel. I'm the CEO of the Science-Based Targets Initiative. For those that might not know us, the Science-Based Targets Initiative is a global initiative defining what corporate climate ambition aligned with science looks like. With last year, at this same date in the last COP, this is an initiative that started as a dream of trying to bring clarity and support to companies on what it means to move from doing something on climate change to moving to doing enough to fight our climate problem. At that time, 1 year ago, we had 2,000 companies committed and 1,000 companies with targets and plans validated. That was 1 year ago. 1 year went by, and now we have doubled. Today, we have about 4,000 companies that have committed and 2,000 companies worldwide which have actually already set their plans. So this is just confirming this trend of exponential growth that we're seeing on corporate climate action. The number of companies committing and setting science-based targets have doubled every year for the past 3 years. So this, what it started as a ripple, became a wave, and now it's really becoming a tsunami. And today we have here panelists and a distinguished guest that are actually a representation of what this wave, how this wave is becoming a tsunami. So without further ado, because we really want to hear what they have to say and not what I have to say, just going to quickly introduce the panel. And first, I just wanted to say what an honor it is to have such a distinguished panel, and more than that, what is an honor to see all of these women leaders on the panel. It's not something that we see as common, but here it's 100% of the leadership, which is really women's. The future is female, so I could not be more honored to be leading the discussion on this panel today. So we have today with us Mrs. Denise Rios, Sustainability Director for Latin America at Natura from Brazil. My good friend, which we've known each other for quite some time. Mrs. Lisa Wee, from the Global Head of Sustainability at Aviva from the United Kingdom. Mrs. Lucy Rodriguez, Chief Communicator Officer from Cement in Mexico. And Ms. Wala El Husseini, did I pronounce that correctly? El Husseini, thank you, Wala, Executive Director of Global Compact Network in Egypt. So as I mentioned, you see here some of the leaders that are either implementing this, such as the companies presented, but also our partners at the UN Global Compact, which are helping us to move this wave into the tsunami. So without no further ado, we're going to be discussing today a little bit of what does climate corporate ambition looks like, but also going beyond the usual suspects, right? We usually think, and I usually, within Science-Based Targets Initiative, currently about 45% of the companies that have signed up are European companies. About 20% are Asian companies. About 15 to 17% are North American companies, and about 5% are South American companies, and then about 1% from Africa. So and I come from the developing countries. So the first time I got in and said, okay, we need to grow in the developing world, right? But then something realized, and I was like, something hit me, and it was like, you know what? Actually, where the lion's share of emissions, where the lion's share of companies, where the lion's share of the money is actually on the developed world. So the science-based targets distribution is actually a quite fair representation of what the world that we're in. So if there's actually one region that is probably lagging behind, is North America, which probably should be more. But South America, Africa, and Asia are actually demonstrating a good representation of their fair share, and they're very, very good leaders. They're taking the advantage, and companies on those areas that are actually taking the stand. So here's what we are here to discuss today. But although we also have the Europeans as well, just to make sure, which are also a very, very important part of that. So without further ado, I just wanted to start with a question, and I'll start with Denise. Denise, Natura is committed to the Science Based Targets initiative and is currently developing its targets. Last year, the company raised $1 billion on a sustainability-linked bond tied to the emissions performance and sustainable packaging goals. What are your plans regarding emissions reductions in your value chain? And what has been your main objectives as you're developing the science-based targets? And so also, sorry, I forgot. And also, before doing that, also please take the time to introduce yourselves and your companies even before you jump into the question. Sorry about that. So you have 3 minutes to introduce yourself and then 3 minutes to answer the question.
Okay, I'll try. Hello, everyone. Good morning from Egypt. I'm Denise Hills from Natura. Natura is a cosmetic company, a Brazilian company that starts 50 years ago, totally dedicated with impact and biodiversity since the beginning. And we are now part of the group, Natura & Co, that has Natura & Company, Avon, which is most known for around the world, The Body Shop, very known by Europeans, and Aesop, an Australian company. All companies dedicated to pursue an impactful businesses. We launched in 2021, in the middle of the pandemic, our common strategy regarding sustainability, and we have 3 pillars, one dedicated to fight against climate change and protect the Amazon. It's impossible to solve the climate change without the Amazon, and we have a Brazilian company, 60% of the territory in Brazil is made by forest. The second one, tackle human rights in our communities, in our value chain, and for our employees, in our consultants. And the last pillar dedicated to full circularity for our products in terms of packaging, in terms of formula. We are committed to have a regenerative company all around the world. We are now in 100 countries, and I'm leading the sustainability strategy together with the business for Latin America for the 4 companies. So, talking about our commitment, we are a company. Natura starts in the climate agenda and the carbon agenda in 2007, measuring their impacts in scope 1, 2, and 3, and starting a strategic compensation approach. We had a common platform for not only Natura, but more companies in Brazil that allows us to compensate everything that we cannot offset in our value chain. And it's been a very nice trajectory, a very nice path, because it inspires us in thinking our business in a way that not produce a negative impact. But for Natura, the question mark for carbon is it should tackle our innovation in terms of products, our way to thinking about in our business, because it's not more a strategy for compensate. And now we start our path for the whole companies, the 4 companies measuring and being assessed. We are being made an assessment for the last year, 7 months, and we'll have like the first GHG inventory for the whole companies in the whole countries that we have. We start last year, we are finishing now. We are committed with initiatives like Transform Net Zero. We are applying for SBTi. We are waiting for our assumption that we are part of the organization. And we are totally committed with a business that can generate a positive impact. We cannot imagine businesses for the next 2, 3 years, 10 years, until 2030, that are not committed and generate a regenerative approach for the society and the nature that we are using nowadays. For us, it's part of our businesses. I think it's one of the most important initiatives, not only our products, not only our value chain, our activities in general are committed in generate no more impact in terms of carbon and in terms of biodiversity, but in the other way, we are looking for this agenda as an opportunity to adapt us adapt our business for a strategy that will be the business strategy for the whole world in the next coming years. And for me, is this the commitment that we have and an approach to develop these strategies collectively, taking part of the initiatives like Transforming to Net Zero and bringing other companies in our region to share our knowledges and go forward a lot more quickly.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Denise. And as I had heard from you before, I think Natura is an example of, as you said, that not how you have a sustainability strategy, but how you have sustainability in this strategy, which are two completely different things, right? And that's what we want. I remember when I used to work on the private sector, I used to joke as well that I was leading sustainability for a bank, and then my dream was that we didn't have a sustainability department on the bank because everybody needed to be the sustainability department.
It was mine.
So, moving along to Lucy. Lucy, as well, you have 3 minutes to introduce CEMEX and yourself, and then 3 minutes to answer the question that I have for you, which is moving to this new world that we're looking into reducing emissions. It's going to be very hard for everyone, and we need to not diminish the size of the challenge, right? Sometimes folks tell me, Luis, meeting sustainable SBTi requirements are too hard. I say, well, yes, they are, because that's the biggest challenge that we have. But some sectors will have less hard, and other sectors will have more hard. And yours is one of the ones that have the more hard piece, right? It's really one of the sectors that is really hard to abate, really have to rethink the business models and the whole production systems. So could you share with us a little, and you have already a short-term science-based targets approved, and are looking on how to increase that ambition. If you could share with us a little bit of the experience on that specific, very, very, very difficult sector.
Sure. Yes, I think certainly sitting on this panel, perhaps we have the biggest challenge ahead of us. Just a brief introduction of CEMEX for those of you who may not know us. We're a global construction materials company. Our 4 business lines are cement, ready-mix, aggregates, and urbanization solutions. We are considered generally a hard-to-abate sector, but our products also don't have substitutes, and they're absolutely essential to society. We're living in a world that by 2050, population should grow by almost 25%. Urbanization trends are such that we need a new New York City almost every couple of months. Egypt is an example of that. Yesterday, I was able to travel some in Egypt and literally seeing new cities being constructed, which is amazing. Just quickly on CEMEX, we started out in Mexico over 100 years ago. Today, we're in 40 countries around the world. Our largest markets are Mexico, the United States, and Europe, which constitute about 70% of our operating earnings. Climate action has been a priority for CEMEX and for the industry, which I'm not sure people really know that, since the 90s, basically. In the last 2 years, I think we've all felt a much higher sense of urgency on delivering on these commitments. And as a result of that, about 2 years ago, we initiated a climate action program throughout all of CEMEX. And in the last 20 months, we've had the best reduction in carbon that we've had. It's equivalent to what we've done over the last 5 years. So I'm really proud about that. It's not just about targets, it's about execution. I'm proud to say that yesterday, in fact, we did just get validated by SBTi under the new 1.5 degree scenario for our 2030 goals. We're one of a few companies in the global cement industry that have that distinction. And that is the most ambitious pathway for our industry. Just quickly, we are signatories. We've been signatories to the UN Global Compact since 2004. We have 4 SDGs that we've committed to as of 2015. And we joined the UN Race to Zero campaign in 2021. We're part of the UNGC CFO coalition. We also have a green facility for both loans and bond issuance. I think we're the first in our industry to have delivered on that. And finally, we're members of the First Movers. We're founding members of the First Movers Organization, which is an initiative of the World Economic Forum to generate breakthrough technology, particularly in hard-to-abate sectors. So I guess now, just to get to your question, it's been very interesting for me to see how our organization has moved in the space of a year and a half since we rolled out our internal goals. We're a company of engineers, and I'm not an engineer, but what I've learned is you set a goal, you set a plant-by-plant roadmap, and they deliver. It's really been amazing. But of course, that's not enough. We need to educate our salespeople. We need to roll out new products, our commercial platforms. Everything needs to change to adapt to this new reality. And so we've had a very strong education program throughout the company. And it's been really amazing to see the commitment. We have levers in place that get us to our 2030 goals using existing technology. And what we found is we've been able to deliver more than we expected 20 months ago on those levers. We're finding new ways, new technology to move things faster. And the real challenge, however, for us and for the industry is that period from 2030 to 2050, where we need completely new technology. We need carbon capture, which is probably the most likely, but there are other levers as well that we're exploring. And it's this decade we have to find the answers to get us from 2030 to 2050. But we believe our products are essential. Transition is very, very possible. What we've learned is just having the aspirations as well as the commitment really can move things much, much faster than we ever dreamed even 20 months ago. So I think I'll pause there and let my peers speak.
Well, thank you, Lucy. That was fantastic to hear. And as you said, setting the ambition is just the first step, right? Is the action that really matters. But I was very keen to hear what you confirmed. What is kind of our assumption that if you don't set from the start what success looks like, you never know how to get there or how you're going to get there. And that's what we're trying to help and work with the company. Say, let's define what success looks like. And sometimes it's scary, but that goalpost is really what gets the whole machine to move, because otherwise we get there and then it just becomes a storytelling competition. We cannot measure our progress towards their goals, as you just demonstrated that your folks have increased. And we've seen on the SBTI that companies with SBTI targets actually reduce emissions faster than their peers, right? So defining that goal is so important. And you also mentioned about how you increased your ambition from one level to the next on the short term, putting yourself on the path towards net zero. And now I wanted to pass on to Lisa, which is from Aviva, and also just actually got a target from not only the short term, but the long term, the net zero vision. So going not only on the path, but saying, I'm going even further and I'm going to see what is going to happen on that very difficult part of the journey, which is the long-term vision to get to net zero. So Lisa, would you first again introduce ourselves to you and to Aviva, and then, as I said, Aviva just got your net zero science-based target approved this year, including a challenging goal of 100% renewable energy by 2030. Having just completed this important milestone, right? It's the short term and the action which is important, but then it's that long-term vision when the things are going to start to get even more complicated, as we already took care of the easiest things or the less difficult things first. What are the main takeaways and achievements for the organization of going through that process?
Can everyone hear me? Yeah. Thank you, Luis, for the question, and thank you, UN Global Compact, for inviting us to speak and share our experience, as well as the ICC. So, yes, I'm Lisa Wee. I lead sustainability at Aviva. We are an industrial software company. Actually, we were a startup out of Cambridge University in the 1960s that has now grown to be a FTSE 100 company. And really, we work with 20,000 industrial customers across 12 different industry verticals, and we help them to engineer their plants and operate their plants as efficiently as possible. So maximizing the use of energy, but obviously optimizing for waste, for water, and other areas as well. And we've also seen now in a kind of a connected industrial economy world that we are able to do so much with the data that we are now gathering, and that it's really important to be using that data to drive down emissions, but also to achieve our other goals around biodiversity, and also ensure a just transition. So a little bit about our philosophy. So and our program at Aviva, from a sustainability standpoint, we think about our technology handprint, which is the positive impact that the solutions themselves can have when we work with CEMEX and other hard-to-abate sectors and help them to make progress. But we also think about our operational footprint and leading by example. So, we're part of the climate solution, but we also need to be part of the climate mitigation answer, which is why we felt it was so important to commit to SBTI, and to have a credible short-term target with a 2030 timeline, as well as a longer-term vision. And that longer-term vision, I think, was really important as well to explain the complexities of what we were trying to do to the entire organization. And we needed that balance of the shorter term, but also the longer term vision. So yes, we're very excited to be early in the global cohort to have our targets approved. It was definitely, and it's been an accelerated journey because we made an acquisition of a US-based privately held company 6 months before we submitted all of our paperwork to SBTI. And so we had sort of part of our organization that was fairly mature because of regulatory requirements in the UK, although maybe carbon accounting had been looked at more from a compliance lens than from a driving implementation. And then we had a new part of the business that had no systems, no tracking, no history, didn't really understand. And we said we're not going to slow down our timeline. We believe that we want to set these targets. So we launched into a very big effort very quickly to get buy-in, to win people over, to understand this is actually not about compliance. This is about, we don't want data for data's sake. We want you to give us the best answers that you can so that we have a good baseline, but so also that we're set up to implement afterwards. So we worked very hard on cross-functional implementation, having working groups, explaining why the data mattered, explaining what would come next. We also really combined that with executive leadership. We had a committee that was chaired by our CEO that met almost monthly, in part to help move quickly on our climate targets, but also address other priorities, including DE&I, diversity, equity, and inclusion. But that was really, really foundational to have that leadership buy-in, that leadership forum. And we brought, in that committee, we had our chief finance officer, our chief people officer, our chief product officer, because again, those were all the leaders that needed to understand what we were committing to so that we would know that we would have resources afterwards to move into implementation. So getting that buy-in was really critical, and again, that's sort of where we are now, is in this, we have the targets, what are we doing to implement? Do we have teams activated? Do we have our travel group activated around what reduced emissions around travel means? Do we have our supply chain team engaged around working with our suppliers? And we also moved very quickly in the on some of the lower hanging fruit for us. So we are 6,000 people. Compared to some companies, we have a fairly small footprint. Our scope 1, scope 2 is less than 10,000 tons of CO2 equivalent. It's very small. So we, very, very quickly we went from 5% renewable electricity to 100% for all of our offices, because we felt, again, it's something that we could do now quickly, would show that we are committed to this. And we're continuing to work on some of the bigger challenges, which I'm happy to get into more later, that I was alluding to around scope 3 in particular, and how we're set up to implement, because the target that keeps us all up, keeps me up the most at night, is how do we get to 50% reduction on our scope 3 emissions by 2030? So.
Thank you very much. Yes, so I heard a few things. Well, the first one, that as you said, one does not manage what one does not measure. So the importance of that, not only of doing that internally, but also a company trying to help other companies to do that, because that's the only way that, again, you measure success against that. I think the other thing that I heard was a short-term and long-term. So the short-term, the plan that you're delivering, the short-term, the long-term, the vision, to guarantee that you're not making decisions today that will impede you to get to that vision, even though you might not have all of the answers today on how to get to that long-term vision. And the final one, the governance structures and internal executive buy-in really, really matter, right? Because one thing is getting the plan, and then once you get by the execution, you need that buy-in. So thank you so much for that. So moving on to next our next distinguished panelist, I wanted to pass on to Wala. So Wala, as one of our UN Global Compact is one of the founding partners. Hello? Okay. Can you hear me now? Hello? Good? Okay. Anything with me? Should I just... Let me try. Hello? 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 Oh, use this one? Okay. Hello? Good now? Okay. Thanks all. So as I was saying, you cannot hear? Can you hear me now? Okay, good. Thank you. So moving on to Wala, as I was saying, so Wala is the UN Global Compact is one of the founding partners of the Science-Based Targets Network. So I just wanted again to thank the partnership. Together with CDP, WRI, WWF, which are the other founding partners, and the Women Business Coalition, which is a new partner that was brought in. We heard the corporate perspective about climate action. Again, as one of the founding partners, the UN Global Compact is the largest corporate sustainability initiative in the world. So how is UN Global Compact within the local networks, right? You as the Egypt representative, supporting companies in this journey towards net zero and climate action?
Okay, can you hear me? Yeah. So you did the introduction part. I don't have
Yes.
to do it.
Sorry,
yeah?
Absolutely. Sorry. Introduction
No,
first.
I think that's enough. You talked about the Global Compact, and I think everyone knows about the Global Compact. What we do with the private sector to advance its climate agenda, as a Global Compact, we do 4 main things. First, we lay the right foundation for responsible businesses. We educate and we implement strategies inside the corporates and businesses on how to be responsible through our 10 main principles. Second thing we do is that we help companies implement their strategies that match the local context. Every company and every corporate is unique, have unique needs and demands. So we tailor programs and tools based on the need of the companies to make it able to advance its sustainability practices. Third thing, which is very important, is that we do awareness and capacity building. And we started this year deploying our climate ambition accelerator. And if I'm going to talk about it, I'm going to talk about it a lot and a lot, maybe later in this session, because it was really amazing and it was really first time to have it in Egypt. Fourth thing that we do, and this is really, really very important for businesses in Egypt, is that we partner for the goals. We help companies collaborate. We have open dialogues and do policy advocacy, because environment in Egypt is it's not different than the rest of the world, but you know, regulations sometimes are not supporting companies to be sustainable. And sustainability comes at costs. And SMEs, of course, is a different thing. When we talk about SMEs, we are going to talk differently. But even for big companies, regulations are not that much supportive, although panels are supportive and announcements are very supportive. But on real ground, it's not that easy. Access to finance is a real big problem. Knowledge transfer and finding the right expertise at not a low cost, but acceptable cost. So these are all problems that the private sector in Egypt is really facing as a challenge. So recently, we have been working like 2 months ago on this thing, on policy advocacy, where we worked on 2 main sectors. The first one is the solar sector, where we gathered all stakeholders, financial institutions, technical institutions, government, investors, commercial sector, and all the off-takers. And we have this very, very, very wonderful workshops where we have them in groups. And we were asking each one to address the challenge And then we got the government with us. And we tell the government all the challenges. And we finally managed to have a compromise. And we are going to launch, an hour after this session, we are going to launch the declaration of the solar sector in Egypt. So, thank you. So this is one thing we are doing, and we are going to continue in the coming year. The second sector we are working on is the construction and real estate sector, because it's a major contributor to carbon emissions. And the sector really needs help. When we approached big players in the sector, they were really so happy. So we already announced yesterday the construction and real estate declaration under the name Building for Better Lives. So it's a human thing. It's not just we're doing it for the industry. No, we are doing it for the human being. So by this, I think we are doing the best for the private sector, because we are allowing all the stakeholders to engage. We pave the way to create the right environment for discussions. And I believe this is what really the private sector needs in Egypt. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Juan, and thanks again for the support on pushing the partnership and giving the support to the local companies that need that sometimes we cannot do at the global level, and really rely on you and the networks of Global Compact to help us with that, which is a big part of us, of this wave becoming the tsunami. And the second thing that I heard was also the importance of policy, right, and advocacy, which is absolutely clear, right? And just a quick anecdote, I think we need the leading companies to actually do that push for advocacy, because we have the non-leading companies that are going to do the push on the contrary, right? And having that movement really, really helps to demonstrate that this can happen. And if you're a leading company, there's nothing better than a policy that elevates the floor, right? Because it brings your competitors closer to the same level. So if you're elevating the bar, let's bring the floor up as well, because that really helps with this transformation. Up the bar, up the floor, up the bar, up the floor, and that the floor only goes up through regulation, definitely. So moving on to our quick second round. So I'll go back to Lucy. Lucy, Cemex has operations in Americas, Caribbean, Europe, Africa, Middle East, Asia. Such a diverse scenario and context. How does a company manage to the engagement process with investors, suppliers, and other stakeholders? How to ensure the decision-making process truly echoes the nature of this global operation? And I have one quick question. How do you decide where you put your first dollar of abatement investment? Where in this global operations?
Well, first and foremost, we have a global strategy, and we don't distinguish among markets. We contextualize, which I think we just kind of heard a very good example of the importance of that. So we, go into every region with the same goals, but then we tropicalize it, if you can say that, for the specific market that we're in. And I was really happy to hear what Wala was saying, because we do have an operation here in Egypt. It's doing a lot on its own. Regulation is definitely an issue in terms of decarbonizing our sector. But I also want to say that it's not just Egypt. Regulation is critical everywhere. The gold standard for us is the EU, where we actually have a pricing mechanism in place. We have a circular economy that has been in existence for 20 years or so. And we can really up our game and achieve our decarbonization goals in that type of an environment. What I think is interesting is when you look across our regions, in some cases, I think most people think it's the emerging market part that's the most difficult. In our sector, the most difficult is a country like the United States, where you have regulation that is outdated, because for the things that we do, the construction standards, they were all developed in the 1960s when we had our highway boom and other things, and they haven't been updated. And even worse, in the United States, these regulations are determined at local levels. So you can't just change it with a flick of the wand at the federal level. It is a lot easier for us to be able to go into a place like Mexico or some of our Central American countries that don't have the regulations yet, and to help form the regulations that allow us to do things like, substitute our fossil fuel usage with alternative fuels. If we can get waste management in place in many countries, our industry actually can use and extract energy from household waste, for example. And this is in many geographies, particularly in islands in the Caribbean, waste management is an absolutely critical challenge. So just to kind of reinforce what we've already heard on the regulatory side. But regardless of regulations, we try to push forward however we can. We also have public advocacy in place in local levels. One of the critical elements, and we were hearing about it from Lisa, is the importance of having senior managers out there advocating, having it part of our compensation programs, the progress that we're making in terms of climate reduction, and also having an internal price on carbon, even in those regions where there is no market yet for carbon, so that when we're thinking about very important long-term decisions on CapEx, for example, it gets priced into those decisions. And that is critical because when you build a cement plant, that is a 100-year investment. So we need to be changing how we do that now. So I think that those are probably, I don't know if well, and let me get to the investor part. One of my hats is I'm in charge of investor relations for Cemex. We're listed on the New York Stock Exchange. And I think what has been interesting for me is to see how ESG has evolved market by market. Obviously, it started in Europe with the sensitivity there, probably in 2017 or so. And the first approach was almost hard-to-abate sectors we don't want to invest in. And so you saw European investors almost step away from the sector. By the time the US investors came in 2019 to 20, they took a different approach. They basically said, ESG is important to us, but we need to pick the winners, the people that are doing the right thing to make this transition and to encourage them even more to go forward. I think that's driven European investors to rethink somewhat the strategy, which I think is very, very important. And then we also have an investor base in Latin America and to a lesser extent Asia. What has amazed me is how fast they have come into this and how quickly it is becoming a critical factor for them in their investment decisions. So hopefully I covered the question. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I asked that question because I've been asking a lot of people, right? How do you decide with global operations where to invest? Because as I said, we have the majority of companies which are headquartered in the north, but their operations are global, which means that their investments are not going to stay on the north. It doesn't matter, right? As you said, it doesn't matter. It's not distinguished by markets. And here we have an example, which is a country, is a Mexican company which is having trouble investing in the US, right? So the money will flow where it's cheaper and where the local conditions are better prepared. So the call for action for governments in those developing countries is make the conditions, because we have here a bunch of companies that have headquarters everywhere in the globe, and the money will flow to your country if you create the right conditions, right? So moving along, Denise, and we have about 15 minutes now, so I just ask folks to be a little bit shorter on the answers now on the end, because we still have Lila to give us our closing remarks. Let's talk about stakeholder engagement. Natura is one of the patrons of the Climate Ambition Accelerator, a program that is for 2 years has engaged more than 1,500 companies, enabling them to set ambitious science-based emission targets. What is the importance and impact of initiative like this, focus on building capacity with companies from different sizes and countries towards climate action?
Totally important because it builds to us an innovative approach, capacity to go together, to go forward and implement a real performance, environmental and socially responsible and economic approach that includes science-based targets, SBTi, this kind of transformation as a part of normal businesses. As you mentioned, Lisa, ISG is no longer more uncommon. It's become a business as usual. And it is a chance to move forward, to be a leader in this agenda, to tackle the path for the others. At the same time, you work together to bring a new economy, an innovative approach, and for those who aim to take part of this. And accelerate is essential because despite we have 2050 as a goal, the planet has no more time to wait for our actions, and everyone generates impact. And when we start to commit this and address our goals to 2030, it's why we understand the importance. We are connected with the goals and measurements of success of our company, and we should engage more and more, because it's not only about our company. It doesn't make sense if I do my goals, if I can make my goals without the others, because it's a planet experience. It's like a new objective of success for everyone. So being part of initiatives regarding SBTI, together with Global Compact and so many other organizations, is a way to engage in a new path for business success for performance, and a common objective that should be the ability of the companies to address the change that we have in terms of climate change, and not so on, and go forward for the business addressing this kind of thing as a better way of new kinds of success.
Thank you. Yeah, it's not a problem that we solve by ourselves, right? We need to bring everybody on board. And to the question that I think was Lisa that mentioned, right? The scope 3 is also about that. The more your suppliers do it, the easier it becomes to everyone else. So bringing everybody in, this just facilitates the processes, where I like to call 1 + 1 starts to equal 3, starts to equal 4, it starts to equal to 5. So moving on, moving on to the Global Compact Network in Egypt. Again, it's implementing the Climate Ambition Accelerator. Again, on this idea of bringing more folks in, regionally along with other local networks in Africa. In 2 rounds, more than 100 companies have already participated in this accelerator. What are the main lessons learned from engaging with companies regarding the climate challenge within the region?
Okay. In Egypt, the climate agenda is already scaling up, whether the regulations are supporting or not. The trigger is mainly for big companies because of the clients, the international clients, because of the experts, because of the reporting requirements. So they have no other option than to go green. And others have real passions, but these are minorities, I believe. Central Bank of Egypt, like 2 days ago, announced regulations for green financing, and this is the first time in Egypt. The EGX, the Egyptian Stock Exchange, in its listing rules, requires an ESG reporting. So it started. No one can refrain from this. Each company was doing it individually, and they didn't know the science. They didn't know how to do it. Some of the companies, and we have been engaged with them in person, some of the companies put a target to go net zero by 2040, but they didn't know how. They just say, I'm going net zero 2040, and they're announcing it. But how? They didn't know. And they are measuring their current carbon offsetting and saying that this year it's 15%. Next year it's going to be 20%. And we are going to have this solar plant that is going to cut the emissions by, and we're going to add it to our targets. This is how it's being done in Egypt. And we are having this consultant that is taking thousands and thousands of pounds to measure our carbon footprint without giving us the science. They didn't know what's scope 1, what is scope 3, what's scope 2. They didn't know. So I believe when we announced the Climate Ambition Accelerator, it was very new to the private sector. And we managed very easily to get big companies on board. And they were very happy. Even they have experts in the field. They have been doing sustainability for years and years. But when they saw this program, they were really amazed. Now they know what is scope 1, what is scope 3, how to measure. The problem that is facing them is the supply chain, how to go green, because it's a real problem in Egypt. But otherwise, I believe it had a very, very powerful impact, and we are going to have tomorrow in our pavilion in the Green Zone a session for the Climate Ambition Accelerator by Lucas, and we are going to have a pledge from more and more Egyptian companies to join the accelerator next year, because I believe capacity building, measuring and monitoring are keywords. We cannot move forward in Egypt unless we have capacity building, we have measuring, we have monitoring. And we have on the ground lots of companies that are really doing great work, like El Swedi, for instance. This is among the couple of companies like to measure their scope 3. We have Al-Qal'a, we have Oriental Weavers. They are doing an offsetting to their emissions by implanting trees everywhere in Egypt and the United Kingdom. So there are really very, very good practices, but they need guidance, they need science-based education, and they need to help with the tools and mechanisms to measure and monitor. Thank you.
Thank you, Wala. Yeah, so still on this idea on how we bring others into it and sharing experiences and capacity building. Lisa, Aviva has participated in the Climate Ambition Accelerator in 2021 and in 2022. The company has set the net zero science-based targets. What is that journey? What is that journey like? What does it take for a company to set such ambitious targets, and how did the accelerator contribute to that process? And finally, as we're really having to wrap up, if I could just start to take 2 minutes. And one final question, which I'm going to make then also to Denise and Lucy. What is, in 20 seconds, the one message that you send to your peers that are starting the journey?
Okay, so I'm going to combine it all and say my one message is join the accelerator program. It's fantastic. We were so excited when we saw it come through. I immediately went to my team and said, everybody, let's go sign up. Because part of it was, there's this sense, oh my gosh, we're taking this on, we're going to have to invest in all these consultants, and it was really important for us to build capacity in-house. And we had really passionate people who were very knowledgeable about the business, who wanted to grow in this area, and the Climate Action Accelerator really helped them to do that in a number of ways. It helped them, first of all, with the knowledge, the basic stuff about the different scopes. The toolkits were really helpful. Of course, the network was very powerful. They got to get on calls and meet and talk to companies from all different geographies, all different industries, understand maybe what some of the challenges were specific to us software, but also beyond that. And that gave them a lot of visibility and a lot of perspective. But it also allowed them, we had a lot of our customers were actually also part of the program. And so, one of the areas we were really struggling with was around use of sold products, how to get better methodologies around measuring that. And we were able, again, to have those conversations with folks that use our products and to help shape and at least, reassure us that the approach that we were taking was sound. Not that it's easy, but I think that was very confidence building and very important to our team.
Thank you. Denise and Lucy, closing remarks. One message to your peers. What would be your piece of advice? Or
I think I would say be aspirational. We can do this. It is a daunting task when you're kind of sitting there from the outside, but once you make the commitment and you move your organization, I think people will be amazed at how much progress that we can make. So, in a hard-to-abate sector, I think it's really important, set realistic commitments, move forward on those, and I think you'll gain confidence as well as, discover new technologies to get us there.
Denise?
I think as a company, we are shaping the future. So transform to net zero together, you have the opportunity to move forward and faster. And for me, it's an opportunity. Sometimes we do not understand that as a company, as a leaders, we have this kind of the ability to shape the world as we need. So a strategic initiative like that is an opportunity to go forward and faster. Come and commit.
Well, not for your peers, but for your members, one piece of advice?
Okay, my advice for the members is to collaborate and to know that traditional KPIs for operation are not going to sustain the business anymore, but sustainable practices KPIs are going to do the job.
With a better, we couldn't have a better quote to kind of end this discussion, but it's not the end. I just wanted to invite again yet another amazing woman leader and the chair of our board, Lila, to give us some closing remarks about what we have heard today.
Thank you, Luis, and thanks to the great panelists. It was such an insightful discussion. I learned so much about your experience, and I hope the audience and those that are joining online also had a chance to learn from how you're setting science-based targets. So we are a proud partner of the Science-Based Target Initiative, one of the founding members, in fact, and this accelerator program in the Global Compact has become very popular. In Egypt, it's working really well, and congrats, Walla, for the great momentum. There are 69 countries that have companies participating in this accelerator. So what you've heard today, the case for Egypt, we have that in 69 other countries. It's pretty amazing. And 40% of the companies in the accelerator are from the global south. So we want to bring also that community. Some of them are part of supply chains of, some of the companies are part of the supply chain of very large companies that are committed to science-based targets as well. So this is the link that we want to provide and our contribution to the evolution of the science-based target. So I want to congratulate also CEMEX for having your target validated. What a great timing, just for COP. That's pretty amazing. And it's very remarkable to know that companies in the science-based target are actually reducing emissions faster than their peers. So there's no better proof that this is working. So to all of the other companies out there, join SBTI, join the accelerator. The accelerator is giving you very practical tools, learning, exchanges. It also connects you with policy, which is an important link that we have to increase. We have other types of accelerators in the compact, but this one is very special, very popular, and a lot of demand for it. So we want to make sure that we support you all, and our climate team is here and backing all of that amazing work. So with that, I'm going to bring the panel to a close, and thank you all for organizing.